Okay.
Why don't we go to items 1, 2, and 3, and then jump to 7?
Okay.
And then we'll just follow up with the rest of the agenda. But it sounds like action item 7 is critical.
Yes.
With our audience that have our quorum.
Okay.
And
Nice.
Randy just joined, if you want to mark him down.
Fantastic, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we're one about it, that's good.
Just give Peggy 1 second to start the recording.
It started.
Oh, all right. So Chairman Ryan.
Okay, good. Well, it's afternoon everywhere. All over West Texas, it's afternoon. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Ryden. I'm the chairman for the Region E Planning Group. And as you can tell, we've got a busy meeting. I think everybody's thinking about water planning. And so this is the place. I just talked to the Water Development Board folks, and I'll let them introduce themselves here in a minute.
Yeah.
But I told them how our plan is better than New Mexico. So we'll, because New Mexico thinks you can plan stuff in 100 years, which really doesn't make sense to me, but right? Heather agrees with me. She has to because they're.
Yeah.
So anyway, let me just go around here in this room and see everybody introduce themselves. Go ahead.
I'm David Etzold. I represent real estate and development interests.
Heather Rose with the Texas Water Development Board, Regional Water Planner.
Peggy O'Brien, Rio Grande Council of Governments.
Sean Woodard, Marathon Refining, representing industry.
Ron Ellis, Texas Water Development Board. I am Chief of Staff for Director Tanya Miller.
Tanya Miller, Director of the Texas Water Development Board.
Aaron Burciaga, Rio Grande Council of Governments.
Got everyone here. Let's go online. I see we can start off with, I see Roberto. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
It's Roberto Ransom, Economic Development, El Paso County.
And I see John Albright.
Yeah, John Albright with Friesen Nichols Consulting Team.
I'll hop in. John Kennedy, Executive Director of the Presidio Municipal Development District and a member for Rural Economic Development.
Okay. I'll say Arlena.
Arlena Palacios, the public.
All right. How about Becky?
Randy Barker.
No, Randy,
Randy
jumped in.
Randy beat Becky to the punch on that. Go ahead, Becky.
Becky Brewster. Randy Barker, Hudspeth County.
Okay, that just means say it together.
Yeah, Becky Brewster from Van Horn, representing municipalities.
Thank you. Peggy, do we have any more?
I don't.
That.
Just a minute. This is Jerry Grijalva, North Valley Water District.
Oh, okay. There we are. Okay.
This is Jose Landeros with El Paso County representing tourism.
Okay.
And I'm Dan.
Thank you.
Jeff Bennett with.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The business community.
Okay. Did we get Dan?
That was just him.
Oh, okay. So I think everybody's introduced themselves more than once.
One more.
This is Jay Ornelas. Good afternoon, everyone. Manager for Irrigation District in El Paso.
There he is.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jay.
And Randy, one last time, you want to introduce yourself?
Randy
Yes.
Barker, Hudspeth County Underground Water District, Dale
We
City.
got the trifecta from Randy. Very good.
Hey,
Oh,
Summer Webb's on the call as well.
Who's that?
Hey, Summer Webb.
Oh,
Summer
sorry.
Webb.
okay, and we haven't had Jennifer.
Yep, Jennifer Jackson, Corolla Engineers, technical consultant, and I know Becky Gates is here. She's also from Corolla Engineers.
Yes, hi.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Peggy, you think we got everybody introduced today?
I think we're good.
All right.
Can you hear me, folks?
Yes.
Jeff Bennett with the Rio Grande Joint Venture representing the environment, environmental services.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're at item 2 on our agenda. Any public comment? Do you receive any, Peggy, that might have come in or no? Okay.
Not.
So hearing none, we'll go to item 3, recognition of guests and designated alternates. I'd like to have Ron Ellis and Tanya Miller speak a little bit. They're visiting us in El Paso. I got a chance to tell them about our better plan than New Mexico's, but let's have them say a few words to us.
Sure. Do you want me to stand? Can they see us?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Tanya Miller again with the Water Development Board. I was appointed in September. Happy to be here. Just wanted to say thank you for all of the work you guys do on these regional plans. The state water planning process could not work with y'all. Y'all are on the ground. You can tell us what we don't know, which I already learned a little bit today about what we don't know about El Paso. And I appreciate that. Just ready to listen and hear what y'all have to say. Thank you. Ron, do you want to add anything?
Thank you.
No, thanks.
Okay.
Glad to be.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron and Tanya, for being here. So we're at item 4, review and approve the minutes for the general meeting held on November 7th, 2024. Usually Dave Hall's big.
David Hall not here? The other day?
The other day.
Well, then I'll make a motion to approve if there's no objections.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. And I want to say for the record that I did all that without Dave's help. David Hall's help.
David Hall's help.
He usually has to kick me because I skipped one of those steps, so I'm pretty proud of myself. I wrote them down right here.
Good job.
Okay, so, all right. We're on item 5, TWDB general updates by Heather.
We're not gonna skip that for now.
Oh. I think we can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Hey y'all, Heather Rose with the Texas Water Development Board. So just some quick updates from us. Next slide, please. So we have some new leadership. We have Director Dr. Miller, and we have a new chairwoman, Chairwoman L'Oreal Stephanie, and then we have a new executive administrator, Brian McMahon. So say hi when you can. Thanks. So our water use survey for 2024 has been sent out. All the entities in Texas should have received one. And these data are used to support our state water plan. They're the data that kind of are what drives the demand for the regional plans and the state water plans. And we do need to have 3 years worth of data from your entity in order to be eligible for state funds. So specifically, those 3 years currently are 2021, 2022, 2023, and then starting March 1st, it'll be 2022, 2023, and 2024. If you have any questions on filling out that survey, please give us a shout out. We have our email here, waterUseSurvey@TWDB, and you can also call the Water Use Surveys team, and they're happy to help if you have any questions on that. Yeah.
Heather, in the past, we've had some issues with getting responses from the water group users. Who is responsible for following up to make sure that they are pestered to getting us that information?
That's a great question. I think it's self-reporting. It's really up to the entity to submit that, and our team does the best they can to follow up with folks, but there are.
Does it fall on Jennifer's back?
No.
No?
No. Nope. I believe it falls on the entity, and and this is why they're not eligible for state funds if they don't fill that out, because that's kind of the only stick, for lack of a better word, that we have. Yeah. So our team does the best they can, but there are over 3,000 entities and they can't follow up with everybody. So please, if you get that in the mail, don't throw it away. Take a look at it, and if you have any questions, reach out to our team. They're happy to help.
3,000 water group users in the state, not in our region.
Yeah, no. Okay. Our region is more like Jennifer might know that, a couple hundred. It's okay, never mind.
Okay, move on. That's all I wanted to say.
Any other questions on water use survey? All right, next slide, please. So we have upcoming funding opportunity deadlines. SWIFT bridge applications are due on February 1st. So if your entity is looking to apply for SWIFT funds, please send us that bridge application as soon as possible. And more information is on that link there. Your project does need to be in the state water plan to be eligible for SWIFT funds. And then we also have agricultural water conservation grants coming up. And these are grants, they're not a loan, they're a grant for any agricultural water type of project. And these vary from improvements to irrigation systems to cost share with maybe meters through a water district. It really varies. We've even worked with universities on research projects for ag conservation. So if you think you have a project or you know someone who might have a project, please, you can learn more at that link and apply. We also have our state revolving funds are coming up, and some deadlines coming up for general activities. That's coming up in March. We also have our drinking water state revolving fund coming up in April, and then our clean water state revolving fund also coming up in April. All of these are hyperlinked, so you can click on those links, find out more information on the slides. They're also on our webpage. Any questions on upcoming funding? All right, next slide, please. So we have some upcoming webinars, informational webinars on our water loss, use, and conservation reporting requirements. And these, we just had one January 16th. We have another one on the 12th of February and then one on the 11th of March. And you can register for those webinars at that link there. These water use survey that we just talked about and the water loss audit and water conservation reports and annual conservation reports and utility profile. It's a lot. We got a lot of reports that we're asking for entities, and these webinars are designed to walk y'all through exactly what's required, where to get more information, who to reach out to if you have questions. So we highly encourage y'all to attend these. They're all online, obviously they're webinars, and operators will earn 4 hours of continuing education credit by attending these webinars. And these reports are also required for state funds. So when you're applying to any of those programs I listed earlier, our team, the conservation team, will be looking to see, are y'all up to date on your water conservation plan? Are you up to date on your water loss audit and your water use survey that we just talked about? So it's a lot. It can be very confusing. So if you need any help, highly recommend attending these webinars. If you can't attend the dates, they are recorded, so you can watch recordings of the webinars. But as always, just reach out to our team if you ever have any questions about any of these things. Yep.
I don't remember us having these webinars in the past, but if that's new, I applaud you. How many new water user groups do we have? And by new, I mean that have come aboard in the last couple of years here in this region. Do you have any idea? Jennifer, do you have any idea there?
I don't think it's been that many.
We really haven't developed any new water user groups, so most of them are used to this process, aren't they? I'm asking Jennifer that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We don't have any new WUGs listed for this cycle of planning. So I would imagine most of our water user groups are comfortable with the planning process. However, I have seen like a change of staff members perhaps inside the district or the utility or entity. And so therefore there may be some new members to that WUG.
Got it.
Right. And another thing is we have a new validation requirement for state funding. So this is a new program that went into effect on the 1st of January 2025. So this is a new requirement for all existing and incoming financial assistance. So again, these are all required for financial assistance, and with new staff or just new requirements, it gets confusing. We just really don't want anyone to get hung up when they're applying for funding on things like your water conservation plan's out of date, things like that. So trying to help you all out with that. Any other questions? All right, moving on into planning. So we are at the finish line. You'll notice that this timeline has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter over the years. And as we all know, the initially prepared plan, or IPP, you're going to see that acronym a lot today in the next couple of meetings, is due on March 3rd. And then your final plan is due on the 20th of October. Next slide, please. So this is what to expect coming in the next couple of months. Y'all will be approving your initially prepared plan, hopefully on, I believe, February 27th is the plan date. And then after that, the top line is in purple. That's what the board, or me specifically, we're going to be reviewing your plan and looking for if we have any comments. And then at the same time, your group is going to be posting your hearing notice, so your public hearing for this plan, and that has to be posted 30 days before the hearing takes place. You'll also be sending copies of the plan to these specific locations, so your local libraries, your county courthouses, county seats, and this is when the public comment period opens. Then you'll, sometime in the spring or summer, y'all will have your hearing and you will accept your oral and written comments at this hearing. And then you will continue to accept public comments for the next 60 days after that hearing. And then after all the comments come in from the public and from the water board and also TCQ and parks, the group will convene and they will consider and address all of the comments. And then Jennifer will make changes as needed to address those comments, however y'all choose to do that. And y'all will meet and adopt your plan. And then finally, it will be submitted to the board on October 20th. Any questions?
So I have a question. If we prepare the IPP and we have our public hearings, and just theoretically, if there is limited comment, are we required to have a follow-up meeting, public meetings afterward, or is that adjusted? Is there an action that says you have to have public hearings regardless if any comments on IPP is received?
Oh, you definitely have to have a hearing, yes. And yeah, it's possible you can have a hearing and you get no comments.
So you have to have a public meeting for IPP and the final document?
Yes.
So the IPP hearing that you have on the schedule will have to be done before March 3rd, correct?
No, this will be after March 3rd. So you submit it, and then after you submit it, you have a hearing.
So then there might be revisions based on that hearing?
There could be, yeah.
My comment was.
So we have to come back and be approved, any changes?
Yes.
And then we have to resubmit?
Yeah, then you submit your final. That's why it's an initially prepared plan. It's not your final plan. It's like any.
I follow, okay.
So there might be two public meetings in this process coming up in this next 8-month window,
Yes,
right?
at least two, yeah.
One in the spring and one in the summer with any final IPP comments.
Yeah, because you have to have your hearing and then you have to adopt the final plan.
Do you want to have those rural and urban meetings?
I'm just kind of asking these questions because, you know, some of these public meetings we've had in various cities have had limited
Attendance, yeah.
And I'm just kind of asking that out loud, that,
What do you all that are attending this meeting think about these upcoming public hearings?
So, Mr. Chairman, can I speak?
yes.
Just to clarify to the planning group, or at least give you some historical information as to how we've handled these meetings in the previous plans. So on the 27th of February, that's when we're adopting our IPP. And you have seen chapters for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, and we've been approving chapters all along the way. Today is chapters 2 and 7 and 8. And then when we submit the IPP on March 3rd, what ends up happening is we will schedule a public hearing, so maybe mid-April, And at that time, the public will have had 30 days to access the IPP, whether it's a hard copy or a link that'll be housed on the Rio Grande COGS website. On that meeting, let's say mid-April, we'll start with the public hearing. This is how we've done it historically. We'll open it up to address and hear if there are any public comments. Typically, there have been 0, and no one from the public has attended that meeting. If there are no comments, we close out that public hearing and we open it up as a normal regional water planning group meeting, and we'll conduct our own business at that meeting. Then we close that meeting and we've met now that requirement from the Water Development Board. The board and the other state agencies still have our hard copy, and they're combing through it and they're reviewing it and they're going to provide feedback. When they provide me that list of comments that have come out of their review and TCEQ's review and the Texas Parks review, now I have to go in and address every single one of those comments. And there is a structure to doing that. And so your plan will have the revisions that are necessary to resolve each of those comments. And it'll have a document within your plan that says this was the comment, and on this page, this is how I've addressed the comment. So when we meet again to adopt our plan, you'll have that revised plan, and we can cover what those comments were, if there were anything significant to discuss or not. And then we adopt our plan, and then I have a little bit of time to do whatever last minute, tying up needs to be done before I submit our final plan October 20th of 2025. Does that help to kind of clarify what that path forward may look like?
It does, Jennifer. So we have 4 months after the March 3rd deadline to wait for the official comments that you will be reviewing. And then how long do you think well, it depends on the comments, I guess. So we won't be probably till August that we're going to be addressing the final revisions?
I had to submit my comments to her by July.
By July 1st?
Yeah, so she would need some time to process those.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get in my head.
Yeah, so August or early September would be kind of a good ballpark to consider our meeting. That'll give me enough time to address the comments and get the updated changes into our plan and be able to, create some meeting material that explains what revisions were made by whom, for us to have a meaningful discussion. So I would say, mid to late August, early September, and we can kind of keep a pulse on that as, we march forward.
Got it.
Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions on the process and hearing? Well, we revisit this in February.
One other question, Jennifer or whoever, when we have our meetings, is there one, say, for El Paso and a similar meeting for the rest of the western region? I know that we've had meetings in the past in, say, Van Horn or Marfa, and a public comment in El Paso. What's the concept of that? Reaching out our whole area of the 7 counties. How do we address that with the public meetings?
Yeah. So we would address it much like we do our own regional water planning group meeting. So if the group would prefer to change locations and have it more in the rural area, that is fine. It again is on the same day as our typical regional water planning group meeting. It's just we're going to open up that meeting for public comments. We're going to take public comment from anyone who's actually there in person or anyone who's joined virtually. And like I said, historically, we've had no public representation typically. And so then we would close that meeting out and then proceed with our own planning group agenda. So Scott, it's up to you if you want to have that meeting in El Paso, if you would prefer to put it out in the rural area, making it a little more convenient for some of our rural communities to get to.
Okay.
And you only need one public hearing, by the way.
Yep.
Some groups choose to have more than one.
So you could have one, either rural or urban,
Either or both.
and it'll be hybrid.
Yeah, the requirement is one. Some groups choose to have a couple in their region, but that'll be up to y'all.
Okay,
Historically, y'all have had one.
yes. Okay. I don't have any questions on this.
Okay, well, again, we'll revisit this in February. Oh, next slide, please. And we sent out the IPP checklist. So these are all the requirements that the state requires for your plan. And it's just a handy way to kind of go through the plan. And this is more for your consultant, but just a reminder that that's out there for y'all to use. Do you have any questions? And that is it for me. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Yep, Scott.
Okay, so in the interest of time, and we have an action item that we need to address today, and that is item number 7. So we're going to skip number 6 right now. We'll do that at the end, and you all are going to help me remember to include number 6 at the end. But we have our active audience right now, our quorum. So we're going to go to item 7. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve the draft IPP chapters 2, 7, and 8, and authorize Carollo to work with WUGS and/or the TWDB on any final modifications.
Move to approve.
That was Jay, wasn't it?
Wow. That's Jay? No, he's shaking his head.
Martinez with the city of El Paso.
Oh, Omar.
Okay, so let me skip to those slides for the sake of time. And I also, Peggy, wanted to let you know that I think Mr. Black joined the call. So we might have a quorum even if 2 voting members need to step away for another meeting. But I will review this with you about as quickly as I can. So in our chapter 2, if you remember at our November meeting, we discussed the findings of Dr. Fullerton's study, and he joined our call and he was able to speak to the group on how he conducted that study and what his findings were. And then we looked at that output of those population projections across the 50-year planning horizon and compared them to what is in the regional water plan that started with what the Water Development Board gave us as our base data, and then we did a heavy survey in the region, contacting all of the WUGs and asking for justification in modifying those values if they felt that that was appropriate. And then that is what we submitted in our technical memo and our revision request letter. And so the step now was to ask Dr. Fullerton to kind of put his Excel sheet into maybe a 1 to 2 page letter or little memo summarizing his findings so that we could use that as our Appendix 2A. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, but I also wanted to remind the group that in addition to having now in our IPP his documentation of his local study and the outcome of those findings, we also agreed to use a management supply factor, and not just the management supply factor that the Water Development Board generates on our behalf, but a custom fit management supply factor, where we calculated what that uncertainty might be or buffer for each WUG. So we've done due diligence in building up this draft chapter with the data and the research material that can help us validate and justify what we feel like the population projections ought to be within Region E. So in your handout, or if you're downloading links from Peggy's site, you will have in Chapter 2 now your Appendix 2A. And this is just showing you where inside Chapter 2 we have put reference to that Appendix 2A. It was also presented in our November meeting and our October meeting. And then the next slide just shows you a snippet of what Dr. Fullerton provided the COG, and then the COG sent that over to me to include in our draft plan. So he did a nice one-page kind of summary of his findings, and we have that now in the back of Chapter 2 as Appendix 2A, and it, along with all the other conversation around planning for those uncertainties in our population projections and our water demand projections, has all been included in Chapter 2. Any questions about Chapter 2? That was really the only update to kind of bring to the group. Before I move into Chapter 7, I just want to pause and see if the group has any comments.
Jennifer, you had mentioned that this Dr. Fullerton report as an appendix for 2026 might be the launching way to the 2031 plan. How does that work? Just so we kind of all understand what we thought we heard earlier, that this might be our numbers for the next plan. Can you comment on that?
Oh, I can comment on what we saw when we did the comparison. So to kind of remind the planning group, when we compared all of the heavy survey work from one WUG to the next, which required a lot of phone calls and conversations and collecting of any kind of data that would justify an increase to those populations. When we compared what we had asked the board to revise our population values to and what Dr. Fullerton provided, what we saw is that the data that we collected from the WUGs was actually projecting higher populations in 2030, 2040, and 2050. So that was our near-term planning, which I really think is more critical because, of course, we plan every 5 years. So we have opportunities to revise 2050, 2060, 2070, 2080. What we saw in Dr. Fullerton's data is he was under slightly less in projecting population growth in 2030, 2040, 2050. When we hit 2060, Dr. Fullerton's data was slightly higher than our projections in the plan currently. So in 2060, 2070, and 2080, Dr. Fullerton was projecting greater growth in our counties than what we currently have in our plan. And so what I would conclude in that is we did a really good job questioning the starting point of the TW data, who gave us the flexibility to go out and do some heavy surveying in the region and had a huge participation in collecting the right data for each WUG to feel comfortable with how they wanted to revise the growth they feel is happening in the area locally. And that got us to, 2030, 2040, 2050. Now, Dr. Fullerton's data is showing that there's more increase in growth starting in 2060. At which point, when we plan 5 years from now, we'll have another opportunity to revise, both data sets. And however the planning group wants to move forward with that is up to you. It may be that our data that we've used in this plan is our starting point for the next plan. It may be that the group wants to ask Dr. Fullerton to do a reassessment of population growth locally, and maybe that produces different values. But as of right now, I feel very comfortable with what we did while Dr. Fullerton was kind of working on his stuff, in addition to then looking at that management supply factor and just saying, okay, if both data sets are still not 100% accurate, let's plan with a buffer. That's probably a long answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, but I would say we're in a good position to look at both data sets and determine which one would be our starting point for the next cycle of planning. But by having Dr. Fullerton's data in our plan of which we will adopt, it provides us a foundation to build on if that's the direction we choose.
Jennifer, I was looking at this Appendix 2A-1, and just out of curiosity, I didn't see El Paso County there and was wondering why.
So we would have to go back to Dr. Fullerton and ask him to reassess that. I do see it here on the screen, in the text, but this was provided by him. This is his summarized report acting as our Appendix 2A. So maybe we need to connect after the meeting and make sure that he is accounting for all of the counties, because I know his Excel sheet that he provided to us that we looked at in our November meeting did have all the counties.
Just, it seems incomplete with what we asked him to do for all of Region E, including El Paso County. It ought to show his projections for El Paso County along with the other 6 other counties.
I see that at the center here. I do see that El Paso County isn't listed. So Peggy, can you just mark that down for you and Annette and I to maybe coordinate on sometime later this week, early next week?
Okay, so
Jennifer, so if we do an action item approving this chapter, we should probably have a footnote to the motion stating that there might be an amendment to that addendum.
Yeah, that I would just bring in his corrected Appendix 2A and
Correct.
put it in the plan. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, Jen.
Okay.
Yep. And I think
So-
that's in the language of the agenda item where it's giving me that flexibility to work with the WUG or the board on those types of changes.
So Jennifer, since you've finished talking about chapter 2, is it an action item right now?
Nope, not yet. I'm going to show you some updates in 7 and 8, and then we'll just take one action item for all 3 chapters.
Okay, so now you'll talk about 7.
Yes. So this will be real easy because there were no additional feedback provided. So our chapter 7 that we looked at in our October meeting and then again at the November meeting has not changed. However, I will remind the group that we did receive some really good feedback at one of those meetings from both Jeff Bennett and John Kennedy, and I know they're here today, as to some things for us to think about related to drought in the next planning. So I've kept this both in PowerPoints and also notes for how we want to include some of these ideas in the next cycle of planning. I didn't want the 2 gentlemen to think that I had forgotten, but outside of what we want to enhance for this cycle of planning, there was no additional feedback to our chapter 7, so it stands as is. Any comments or questions around chapter 7?
Is Jeff here today?
Yeah, he's on the call virtually.
Jeff, can you give us some background on your comment, please?
Sure. Our streams over the last 100 years have been degraded. They've been incised, so annual flood flows are no longer connected to floodplains, meaning floodplains no longer get wet. So those floodplains can't store water. And so once perennial streams or at least perennial stream segments and ephemeral stream segments are now drier. Our streams are getting drier because they've been degraded. There's a lot of reasons for that, from mining, logging, heavy grazing pressure. So stream restoration can slow those flows, capture sediment, and reconnect those annual flows with the floodplain. So not only can we increase storage and make our streams wetter, but we can attenuate flood flows. So this is a strategy that I've been advocating for both in this plan, in this group, and in the flood planning group. Yeah, so does that cover it?
Yeah, I was really trying to figure out what kind of discussion you wanted to add related to your comment. So
well, when we go over that, is it chapter 2, whatever chapter we're talking about here in a bit, there's a list of 24 strategies. I have some suggestions on how to bring that into that list of strategies. You know, this is work that my group and other partners are doing in the Big Bend area and in Culberson County, working on stream restoration and increasing, rehydrating these watersheds, basically. This increases recharge, attenuates flood flows. These are good strategies for long-term sustainable management of our water resources.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff and John, for your comments. I'm always looking for ways to help the group enhance their plan. So I look forward to working with you both as we move some of these ideas into the next regional water plan. All right, and lastly was Chapter 8. Again, remember that this chapter discusses the planning group's policy recommendations, and there are 5 major sections inside our Chapter 8. We looked at all of these subsections and what we had in our previous plan at our last meeting, and since that time, I've received no additional, well, actually, no, I have received one, yes. Omar Martinez connected with me, and for the group to consider, he would like to add a new recommendation. It's not in your printout. It came in after all that went to Peggy for posting, but I have added it since. And for the group to consider, what he's proposing is a recommendation that proposed municipal utility districts, or MUDs, be required to coordinate with the regional water planning to better inform the 50-year supply estimate. So again, I've added this new language as number 9 to the regional water planning process inside section 8.2. And this revision was made after sending Peggy copies for your review. But I think Mr. Martinez is joining us virtually, so I don't know if he wants to expand on that or if you have any other questions for him.
I'm happy to provide a quick summary. The reason this is required is because of a new MUD that is adjacent to the airport. This is the Iron Point MUD. That it would be built pretty much right next to the desalination plan, and they have plans to tap into the water in that area. We didn't learn about this until recently when they filed for TCEQ, and it's definitely going to impact whatever the desalination's water supply plans are. City of El Paso has been in discussions with El Paso Water to respond to this, and I think this is a way for any future development to accommodate and future MUTs to at least make the entire region aware of what their water use plans are. This MUD is located in land that was previously owned by Fort Bliss and was essentially sold off about in 2013. No other public entities were interested in the land. They didn't they didn't make an offer. So it went to a private developer that is looking into the MUD to meet its water needs for development. It includes like a data center. It includes residential, commercial. They have plans, but we haven't received concrete water use numbers from them. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to insert this as part of policy.
Omar, this is David. When you use the word required, who is going to require this, and what method do we have of making that requirement on a new MUD?
Sure thing. Authorization of MUDs requires a checklist from TCEQ. All it would add is a bullet on that checklist requiring the MUD developers to just check in with the water planning groups across the state.
And provide information about their plans and their projected demands?
For now, the language I would like to include is to coordinate. What that coordination looks like, we can provide additional details as we get to the final versions of the plan. It's something that we'd like to go into further detail with the water planning group to see what information you all would want to require. But at least having them reach out to Annette or to Jennifer, letting them know that this is happening is already huge. It's already a much needed improvement.
No, it's a good idea, and I'm familiar with the project. You used a date of when it was sold. I understood it was sold this last year in a sealed bid sale to a local development group. Is that the large piece of property that took place last year?
Yes, what I'm trying to get at is that public sector had an opportunity to get first dibs on it in 2013. And so because that didn't happen, eventually Fort Bliss sold it to a private developer.
Right. I know the developers that are developing that project, and you're correct. The El Paso Water Utilities is concerned about how service will be provided and what sort of agreement they're going to have for ETJ extensions. Are you all working on that right now, Scott?
I don't know that part, but I'm assuming that they're going to enter into some kind of wholesale agreement to
Yeah.
get their water from us and wastewater.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's a good idea. I just wanted to make sure that we had some teeth in your recommendation, Omar. That was all.
Yep. So to that point, that last sentence that Omar provided says, ideally, this coordination would be included in this checklist, and then there's a hyperlink. And as you heard him say, just adding some tick box there that requires coordination with the regional water planning group. So I like that recommendation. I've added it to your chapter 8. That chapter is an area for the planning group members to talk about anything, policy recommendation, what works, what doesn't work. So it's now in that chapter. So that concludes the review of 2, 7, and 8. And I think our agenda item 7 does require action.
There was already a motion to approve.
Okay, so I hear that there is a motion to approve.
I'll second. With the provision on chapter 7.
No, chapter 2.
Just give me chapter 2 that we discussed.
The appendix of chapter 2A-1 to include the El Paso data in Dr. Fullerton's study.
So amended. Thank you.
Wow. We got that recorded, right?
Yeah.
All right. So any further discussion? Looks like Jay wanted to discuss something.
Yeah.
Very good.
He's just going to tell us when the river gets here. Okay. Okay.
Not anytime soon, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, let's go to item 8. Consider, discuss, and review draft chapter 5, appendix 5A and 5B and 6 of the 2026 Far West Texas Water Plan.
Okay, so when Heather showed you the timeline of us creeping ever closer to that March 3rd deadline, just know your team at Friesen Nichols and Carrillo have been sweating because these chapters 5 and appendix 5A and 5B are some of the largest chapters in the regional water plan, and they require the most coordination to each of the WUGs and the sponsors of the strategies. So to set the stage, we start with chapter 5. And chapter 5 has 3 major sections. And this chapter is dedicated to your water management strategies and conservation recommendations. It sounds like Mr. Bennett in the next plan has found a good home for that riparian repair type strategy that he's recommending, that I think we can put some language in our chapter 7 and also put some language in our chapter 5 as a conservation strategy, and then some language in appendix 5A and 5B. But this is the place to do that. There's also a lot of various sub-discussions. So you can see I've listed a handful of bullets underneath each of the main conversations or sections. So I really do encourage you to kind of step through chapter 5, 5A and 5B, and chapter 6, and provide any feedback to me so that I can include that feedback into your IPP plan. Starting with the identification of potentially feasible water management strategies, we've looked at this multiple times. It's again reiterated in chapter 5. It kind of lays the story of how do you go about getting to those recommended water management strategies. Well, that first step is to look at possible projects that could reasonably be expected to result in water supply improvements. And we've always done this by looking back at our previous plan, our 2021 plan, and looking at all of those water management strategies. In that plan, we had 58 water management strategies, 9 of which were alternate. So they sit on a back burner. They still go through this same scrutiny of review and evaluation. And they're there in case an entity wants to exchange one of the recommended for an alternate or bring an alternate on as a recommended. So we looked at all of those water management strategies in our previous plan. We found that none of them were infeasible. All of them were feasible, and that was our starting point for developing our 2026 list of recommended water management strategies. Section 2 of your Chapter 5 goes into detail about that strategy evaluation procedure. So laying out, what we as consultants do tied to the Water Development Board's requirements on how we assess if a water management strategy is feasible and recommended. Also in Appendix 5B, it'll explain that qualitative and quantifiable ranking matrix. So right now, I'm sure this looks a little overwhelming, but as you get it in front of you, at a quiet time here in the next week, I'm just calling out those sections to kind of help you understand that there is a process and there is a matrix that we step each of these recommended strategies through in order to complete the evaluation. So all strategy analysis recognize and protect existing water rights, water contracts, and option agreements. There are 3 major tables within your Chapter 5 that list your water management strategy name, the new volume of water supply that the strategy is anticipating to bring on, the decade in which that sponsor thinks it's going to come online, the reliability of that supply, and any impacts that that strategy may have. We also list the total capital cost, the annual cost, and the cost per acre foot. Costs have been estimated based on the September 2023 US dollars. So the Water Development Board requires that each technical consultant use what's called the Unified Costing Model, and it is a tool provided by the Water Development Board. It helps all 16 regions across the state to cost in a similar fashion. The caveat is if the entity has already done some feasibility study or cost estimate or is in the process of applying for a loan, that cost that they have used for that, if provided to the consultant, supersedes what tool we're required to use from the Water Development Board. So we're always looking for a way to have collected the most accurate cost on these strategies. So as you can tell, there's just a lot to take in when you're looking at one water management strategy, much less 68. And I think our list has a total of 68 water management strategies, and we'll look at that here in a minute. All right, the next section contains a lot of information related to this blue highlighted bulleted area here. So really take some time to look at that evaluation and recommendation of water management strategy discussion in your Chapter 2. And please provide any kind of feedback that you think is worthy of adjusting the draft as you see it right now. And we'll talk about the deadline for feedback because we are up against the clock. And then I wanted to kind of break out what those 3 big tables inside Chapter 5 and also again in your Appendix 5A. How did we fare when we looked at our strategies for this planning cycle? So I will say that this region has always had an emphasis on conservation. It is a huge priority to the planning group, and we always promote reuse. So in looking at your list on Table 5-2, if you have that in front of you, we have water loss audit and mainline repair strategies in our plan as our way of addressing the new AWWA methodology of which entities are leaking a little more than that targeted performance criteria. And we looked at water loss audit and mainline repair several months ago and talked through the AWWA methodology. But basically, we have 15 strategies in our region that address leaky existing water lines. 7 of those 15 are new to this plan. So we did a good job capturing some changes that happen from one plan to the next with our leaky infrastructure. When it comes to irrigation conservation, we have a total of 7 water management strategies just geared towards irrigation. Inside Chapter 5, there'll be a section on irrigation and what do we mean when we say irrigation conservation, also a section that discusses mining conservation and municipal conservation. It's all kind of laid out for you in Chapter 5. Mining conservation, we have a total of 3 strategies, livestock, a total of 2 strategies, and municipal, a total of 5, and reuse, a total of 6. If there is a total of 68 water management strategies proposed as being recommended, conservation takes 38 of that. So more than half is geared towards conservation. Okay. Still kind of talking about our recommended and alternate water management strategies listed on table 5-2 of chapter 5. The update is 68. We have 8 of those as alternate. So where we, again, have always carried alternate strategies in our regional water plan, it's a nice way for any WUG to say, yes, I want that in the plan as a possibility. And if I choose to activate it, making it recommended and not alternate, it's eligible for SWIFT funding. If it's removed from the plan and it still might be a possibility, there's just a lot more one would have to go through in order to get it back into the plan in order for that entity to be eligible for SWIFT funding. So it's this balance act of making sure that what we represent in our regional water plan are true and good options for growing communities within the region, removing any of those big pie in the sky, this will never happen, but also allowing for entities to have alternate strategies that can become recommended if something changes between plans and it doesn't eliminate them from any kind of SWIFT funding.
They would have to plan that, just making that clear.
Yeah, there is a process to go about that. But the idea of having them in the plan provides options for that entity. Okay, we do have some unmet needs in our regional water plan for this cycle. You'll see a lot of it predominantly is irrigation in Culberson County, El Paso County, and Hudspeth County. And then we have some mining unmet needs in Culberson County. Unmet needs mean that once we've applied our conservation measure, and once we've applied perhaps another water management strategy, which for a lot of these non-municipal WUGs is an additional groundwater well or 2, we still have a deficit. And that is okay. There are reasons around why some of these non-municipal WUGs will continue to have like a water deficit. Before the meeting began, I think I heard Mr. Chairman talk about, and David, this area is constantly in a state of drought. And in irrigation and in mining, it's governed by the Groundwater Conservation District, governed by that joint planning process where you produce that modeled available groundwater that acts as a planning cap. And so these entities are limited in what they can pull out of our aquifers based on some local groundwater conservation district and the permits there. It's not a big deal. It's just that the regional water plan needs to illustrate where those unmet needs are. Now, if it was municipal, we'd be having a different conversation. But these are your non-municipal entities that just have a huge demand that aren't being met by the handful of water management strategies that have been developed for them. Then in chapter 5, we have a section that kind of helps the reader understand what is looked at as an unqualified strategy. So the board does require that water management strategies listed in our plans develop new water supply in order to be eligible for that SWIFT funding. Now that is very much SWIFT funding focused. There are a lot of other funding options, as you saw Heather in her presentation show you. There's just a lot of different ways an entity can come to the Water Development Board for assistance. But if they're coming in for SWIFT funds, the strategy has to show a new water supply. So projects that involve items such as replacing or repairing old infrastructure and water collection and treatment don't really qualify inside this category. So there's a hyperlink here, or use the one on Heather's PowerPoint where you can look at all the different types of funding options available and or grants. Okay, to wrap up discussion inside Chapter 5 and kind of going into our Appendix 5A and 5B. Appendix 5A takes all of the strategies listed on Table 5-2, and we go into great detail about describing what that strategy requires. Where is it going to go for the water? How deep is the well? How much is it predicted to produce? So on and so forth. So it's basically taking your table 5-2 and breaking it up into mini paragraphs where the reader now has a place to collect more information around each of the strategies. And I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. That table listing 68 strategies is missing information around one. And I know Peggy and I have worked for months now trying to get information around the city of Van Horn and whatever new water management strategy they want in the plan. I don't even know if it's a groundwater well. I made that assumption. So take that lightly. I know it's on the screen. My request to the group is if you have any information on what the city of Van Horn would like to do and details around that strategy, I desperately need that because we are getting very close to a point where by not having it, I need to know, do I leave it blank in your IPP and submit it to the board with blanks, or do we take it out? And so that's kind of my question to you, and you can get back to me here in a few minutes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
I just saw a note from, looks like from Summer. It said
Okay.
it was an additional well.
It's a what?
An additional well?
It is an additional well.
Third pressure zone and an additional well, but third pressure zone is actually the first need.
Okay. Summer, can I connect with you in an email after and kind of forward what we've been sending Mr. Mark?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
we've provided like a template, so it's all there. I just need something back that gives me enough details around it, kind of put it in the plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, good. We have marked that off our list. Okay. So the work in progress will now include connecting with Summer and getting some information around the Van Horn new strategy. In addition, Scott and his team have been coordinating with myself and the Carollo staff members here on what they want in the regional water plan. So if you're looking at your table 5-2, you'll notice that we don't quite have all that ironed out yet. We're in the process of doing some cost estimating for each of those strategies, and we're working back and forth with El Paso on that.
Jennifer, did you get El Paso's per capita till 2080 as a result of my management meeting?
No, the last correspondence I had was with Lisa saying you did have a meeting at the middle of the month. She recommended a few more things come off the list. I responded to that. She said you would connect with me later. So I think there's a little bit more we need to do before we finalize.
We reached an agreement on what we expect on water conservation. So you can plug in those numbers for our conservation savings.
Okay. I'll send out another email and make sure that we tee that up, because I know I sent you a draft of our water conservation discussion and the goal, and then the different types of savings above the Water Development Board savings. So what we typically have in our regional water plan for El Paso Water. If that needs to change, I'll just need to know what, and I'll coordinate with Friesen Nichols. They helped me update that.
Okay.
Okay. And then lastly, I think Raquel is joined virtually with us. So thank you so much for the information coming from the electric company. We do have a new strategy coming in for steam electric power in El Paso County for treatment and reuse of their wastewater. And we have a good write-up in, and we're just needing to do some fine tuning in our cost estimate. So that will come into that table 5253 as soon as we complete that work. Okay. What does your Appendix 5A look like? I just took a snippet kind of at the beginning. So you'll see a lot of red font. This is showing you what's new to this plan, what was not in your previous plan. I thought it would be helpful to see kind of some of the changes being made. So just to give you an idea, it'll start with an introduction to that water user group. So this is for the city of Alpine. Talks a little bit about where the city of Alpine, where they rely on their groundwater, talks about the 3 strategies that, are intended for enhancing their water supply, and we bullet them out. And there is a identifier that we've always used. So it starts with E1, E2, E3. These are the 3 strategies that the city of Alpine responded with multiple surveys saying this is what we want to see in the plan for our, entity. So then we start with E1 and we talk about what that strategy is going to look like. And, there's this quantity, reliability, and cost section, which ties to that matrix in Chapter 5. And we spell it out. What does the strategy assume, and what is that estimated project capital cost going to be? And we do this for every bulleted item for each entity. So that table 5.2 that just lists your 68 strategies, and you can see for which county and which entity by county, your Appendix 5A starts to really spell it out. So this is a good place for the reader to come in and get more information around what recommended strategies were being made by each entity. And then we wrap up that appendix with an Appendix 5B, and it goes into detail about what that strategy evaluation quantification matrix looks like. And so I know you'll look at Table 5-3 where we've had, no, it's actually Table 5-2 where you see a ranking. That ranking, that number 1, 2, 3, 4, it comes from somewhere. And if you go into your Appendix 5B and there's some discussion inside your Chapter 5, it tells you what does a 1 mean, what does a 2 mean, what does a 3 mean for quantity, reliability, and quality, and so on and so forth, and impacts. So there's a lot of work put around the evaluation of each strategy. Questions before I go into Chapter 6?
Jennifer, I made a note earlier when you were giving us the introduction on Chapter 5 strategies, that you said that there were 9 designated alternate strategies, but the text says 8, and you've referred to 8 a couple of times. Was I mistaken? Did I hear that wrong?
Okay, so maybe my slides, maybe there was an adjustment to one slide and I didn't catch it in another. So we have 8 alternate.
8 alternates? That's what the text says on 5-1.
Okay. Yep, 8 alternate, 7 for El Paso Water, 1 for Lower Valley Water District.
Okay, thank you.
And yep. Always like to have that safety net of someone else checking, because I have stared at this for weeks and weeks now. But yeah, so if you go in and review and there's items like that, just send me an email or happy to get on a phone call with you, whatever's most comfortable. And then I will make sure that I look back into our draft and make the appropriate changes. Okay, so the homework really is to kind of look at those chapters and review what strategies are being represented for your respective areas of interest. Now, understand that if you're not the sponsor to those projects, which it's really a water user group, so Lower Valley Water District, El Paso Water, Presidio, Marfa, things like that, we were in conversations with the representatives in those areas, and that doesn't always correlate with the representation at our regional water planning group. So if you have questions about what's being listed for your area, I'm more than happy to get on the phone and talk that through with you. But these recommendations of having these types of strategies in the regional water plan came from their responses to multiple surveys and phone calls. So this is not falsified information. This is information given to us that we've included in the plan and then had to connect back with each of them and ask details, much like what Summer's going to give me for the city of Van Horn. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll move into chapter 6. It's a really easy chapter for a couple of reasons. One, there's only 4 sections in chapter 6. This chapter describes how this 2026 Far West Texas Water Plan is consistent with the long-term protection of water resources, our agricultural resources, and natural resources that are important to the Far West Texas area. This chapter is really kind of designated to the socio-economic impact study that the Water Development Board provides technical consultants. This analysis and report has not yet been provided to the consultants. It will not make it in time for the IPP submittal. They have kind of a goal of getting those socioeconomic impact studies out to the technical consultants come summer. So there's a lot of places in chapter 6, if you're looking at it, where we were instructed to kind of put an X or a blank or something in the sentence that is a placeholder that says when that impact study does get released to the technical consultants, we will come back into our chapter 6 and add the information from that report into our paragraphs. So that will be ready for discussion at our mid-August, late August, early September meeting. I just wanted to alert you to the fact that your chapter 6 will go in for the March 3rd deadline, waiting for some of that data to come back from the board, scheduled sometime this summer. And then you have your Appendix 6A, and this actually is the socioeconomic impact study for the Far West Texas area that the board will give us. I'll just put it in as your Appendix 6A. And that wraps up the discussion around Chapters 5, Appendix 5A, 5B, and Chapter 6 for that agenda item.
So this discussion on item 8, is that an action item or an information? Just information?
Just information. So before we hop off of it, one thing I need to let the planning group know is this unfortunately is going to require you to review those chapters sooner rather than later and offer feedback by no later than, I think I had January 27th. Is that? Yes, that's that Monday, January 27th. Because of the tight timeline and where we're at in our schedule, I have to have pencils down for all changes inside all chapters, to include that I've gone through that IPP checklist that Heather showed you during her presentation by February 4th. That way it gives the Carollo department that's overseeing the document processing and getting it all pulled together and ADA compatible, and our printing time. So for the hard copies that we may need in our courthouses and libraries and at the COG, and shipment of those hard copies, it's all going to take some time, and we need that done before our February meeting. So if you have time to look through those chapters that we've just covered and see anything that needs to be adjusted or modified, it's urgent that you get that back to me by the 27th of January. If we miss the IPP, like that deadline, We still have time after the IPP has been submitted and before we approve our final plan in August or September to make changes. It's just a lot easier for us to do it now while it's fresh in our mind than it is to hold off. So the urgency is January 27th, but if it's something big and we don't meet that deadline, we do have time to make changes to our plan. It is a draft plan that we are submitting on March 3rd, between March 3rd and our approval of the final, whether that's an August meeting or a September meeting.
Jennifer, is that close of business on Monday, the 27th?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So while you chew on that, it is eerily quiet. I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning of our PowerPoint and just recap the few slides that we chose to skip for the sake of having the quorum take action on agenda item 7. Really, there's not a lot here. I know Heather did a great job covering that with you. But typically how we start our meetings is just reminding the planning group what we looked at during our previous meeting. And so there's a bulleted list here where we looked at our population projection comparison and that management supply factor. We did approve chapters 9 and 10, and we were discussing changes to 2, 7, and 8. And so we've covered that in today's meeting, and that has caught us up to this schedule that Heather was able to like do a snippet of that bottom right-hand corner and kind of blow it up. But you can see we are really, really close to finishing out the IPP and getting that submitted to the Water Development Board by March 3rd. Those are hard copies either being hand delivered or time baked in for shipment. And that also has to include that the planning group has a meeting to approve it. So as you can see, this meeting and any changes that come from the content that you've seen needs to happen by close of business next Monday for us to meet that. And then if I kind of fast forward to the end of the presentation, just to discuss what the ongoing work is, and I think, Mr. Chairman, that might be the next bullet, and then I can wrap up my part of the agenda. So I think that's agenda item 13. Is that correct?
Nope. 11 is adjourned, so I guess that would be next time.
9. Number 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just looking forward, what are we doing between now and the next meeting? I know this says the 28th. That needs to be changed to the 27th, as we talked about. My pencil's down to including all the feedback and getting it in its final format is February 4th. And then we submit this thing after we've approved it as a planning group in February. It gets submitted to the Water Development Board by March 3rd. And like I said, if there are changes or additions or things that come after we've had a chance to kind of take more time and look at it more thoroughly, there is time between the March 3rd and the October 20th deadline to not just address the comments that come back from the Water Development Board and any public comments, but anything else that may come out of the planning group and their review. And then this is my final slide. We are nearing the end of that IPP. And during our February meeting, which was set for the 27th, we're going to approve the entire plan from the executive summary all the way to the end of Chapter 10 and all the tables from the Water Development Board. But I think, Heather, you had a question about availability for the 27th of February. I just want to make sure we address that and lock it in because that will change.
Yeah, so I noticed in El Paso's newsletter that you have a big ceremony, opening ceremony on that day. So.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be at a conference in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
Oh, tough.
Well, I'm the president.
Someone's got to do it, eh?
Yeah, part of being president, I have to do it.
Right, and unfortunately, Dave, so either Dave or Scott would have to be physically present at that meeting.
So we can check with Dave
Yeah.
to see if he's
He'll probably
physically,
be here.
yeah.
You'll feel guilty about not being here today.
Huh?
You'll make
Yeah,
up for it.
right.
'Cause he's
He'll
not
make
here
up for
today.
it.
Okay.
That's right, with extra questions.
Yeah,
Do y'all still want to schedule it for the 27th then?
yeah, we have it,
Uh,
27th at 1:30.
Yeah.
Here, okay.
Yeah, that was the plan. Just got to make sure Dave's here.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're gonna have a problem.
Okay. Peggy, you want to make sure that he's on board for that?
Dave?
Dave, yeah, make sure that he's going to be here for that.
Do y'all want to talk about maybe a backup date?
No.
Not unless he says no. If he says no, then you just communicate
I
with all of
will,
us.
yeah, because he was part of the
Discussion.
last time when we
Yes.
did this one and the
That's right,
27th.
that's right.
But I'll double check.
In El Paso, right?
Yes. And should we?
So would that be 12:30 Mountain Time and then 1:30 Central?
Or one mountain, and what would be better, because this was.
We did it in Alpine last time.
Yeah, so that's why we kept it one central, but should we, when we're doing it in El Paso, make it one mountain for everyone? Is that easier?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Do people on the cameras want to nod or thumbs up? Is that good for everybody? Or
Change it to what?
mountain?
Oh, look at that.
Great.
Lots of, look at John doing the virtual thumbs up. Then Becky did a real thumbs up.
Great.
Look, another one. Okay. If Dave is not available, what happens?
You need to pick a date when either of you are available.
Okay, so we need to check early to see if Dave Paul's available.
She needs to come today or tomorrow.
Yeah, okay.
Doesn't Dave have an alternate? Wouldn't that be Omar?
No, he's his alternate.
Oh,
Yeah,
They're alternates to each other.
that's where the circle of alternates ends.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to get back to.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good work.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Share your screen.
Okay, we talked about the next regular meeting on the 27th. That's it.
Yeah.
Next meeting.
We're adjourned.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Jennifer didn't, that was just all consolidated.
Yeah.
Then there's no.
Yeah, I think we're ready for a motion for
motion?
item 11. Dave Etzel gave that motion.
I did.
Yes, I heard him.
Motion to adjourn, sir.
Second,
Who was that, Jeff?
I think it's Jay.
Is that Jay or Jeff? Sorry.
It was Jeff.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank you,
Jennifer.
guys. Yes, thank you.
Y'all.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Have a good
Nice to meet-
afternoon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Do you want to have the hearing, Scott, in Alpine, or
What?
I'm just curious what your
Oh,
thoughts are?
in the future?